Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Whining On. My name's Matthew Bowden, the Incorrigible Rogue, and that was just some of the lovely lockdown pictures taken by our guest today, Mr. JJ Waller. JJ, how you doing? Good to see you, pal.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for inviting me on your show.
My pleasure, absolutely my pleasure. For those that don't know, JJ, I believe, was one of the first people down in Covent Garden performing when it had just got all refurbed in 1980. Am I correct in thinking that?
I'm not really sure. I can't even remember that I knew it had been refurbed or it was new. I just turned up and sort of clicked in with the place. Fantastic. I didn't know that.
And you were performing all the way back in the late 70s before Covent Garden. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, I think around about 1977 I first started getting a little bit of an act together. And the reason I did that was I'd come out of drama school in London and got a job with a community project in Liverpool. I was very interested in drama and education, and I think you'll realise, like probably lots of people you've spoken to, the roots have come from community theatre and theatre and education, that kind of thing. And so I joined a group called Freeform from Dalston in 1978, I think it was. No, 1977, maybe 1976. And Freeform were interesting, really kind of important in terms of community development of the arts. They were a group of architects that wanted to sort of like change the environment of the inner city sort of dwellings in London using sort of mosaics and ironwork sculpture and performance. And I went in with them working in adventure playgrounds.
Okay, and what would you do in the adventure playgrounds? Would you be booked out there as a day as an entertainer?
No, we would go in as a kind of a group from outer space who just landed and didn't have any language skills, and would kind of have to get the kids to try to interact with us on our terms. And yeah, it was kind of playful theatre.
Quite. And had you always before this, just to pull back a little bit to you as a teenager, had you always wanted to be an actor, or did you want to be a film star? What was the drive for the young JJ going into studying theatre?
I don't really know. I think like most of the things that have happened to me, doors just sort of swing open and close and you walk through. And my sister went to drama school, the same drama school I went to, and it was probably the fact that she was 4 years older. I probably got a little bit of a taste from her experience of it and wanted to do the same.
And when you were doing the sort of alien from outer space inside the play areas work, were you excited by it? Were you feeling like this was something important at the time? You said it was important work looking back now, but did you see it then?
Well, that's a great question. I think I probably just saw it as a 22-year-old as just being great fun, really, and sort of taking me out of my comfort zone into areas that I'd never sort of been in before. So yeah, it was just fun. And even like later on working in the streets, it was kind of like, well, I remember one thing that I think is probably fairly pertinent. I think I was about 12 years old and went on a school trip from Brighton to the Tower of London. And I saw a street performer there, and I'm trying to remember his name, and it might be Johnny Eagle or something like that. But he was an escapologist, and he was wrapped in chains, and I knew there was fire and glass involved. It really, really made an impact on me. It really stayed in my memory. Just kind of sat there, I think, and it was like just festering. And I think when I started doing that stuff, it just sort of. Another thing, when I'm working in the street, or when I've worked in the street, or I see people working in the street, what he did to me is something I felt was what we do. We're an investment in kids' imaginations. We sort of like exemplify, we show that there is a different way of doing things. And I think, a number of times people used to come to me in Covent Garden and say, "Oh, I wish I could do what you do. I really think, I wish I had the confidence. I really respect that," and etc., etc. We do sort of like stand out there, a little renegade, and I think we stimulate and excite that kind of imagination. Imagine it happening to kids, then it can be quite powerful. It can also be quite negative. So but mostly I think
depending on the influence given. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So when you're working, doing the alien and the play areas and stuff, what happens then? What propels you out of that into the street? Do you work doing community theatre for a long time?
So the continuity of that would be going to school playgrounds, not school playgrounds, play schemes, I think they were, adventure playgrounds. And we had another project which we took to Toxteth in Liverpool, where I was a film director with a film crew. Obviously, all this is all arranged with the community workers, and but we arrived as a group from Hollywood who wanted to make a film, but all of our equipment had been left in America. I hadn't arrived, the costumes and the actors. So me as the director, JJ, enlisted all the kids, basically. So we acted that we need your help, and we sort of like this willing suspension of disbelief, and got a whole community involved in making films with Super 8 cameras. And we were there for 2 weeks, so it's quite an extended project, and the whole place was animated making this film, costumes, and then they offered me a job, so I stayed there for 2 years. And during that time we also had other visiting artists come along. I remember somebody called Chrissy Trigger from the Rarey show, and I'm sure they were a very early community group. I think they came out of Deptford, and they would do juggling and basic circus skills with kids on projects. So and then in 1977 at the Queen's Jubilee, we used that as an impetus to gain great contacts with the local neighborhoods by offering a show at their street parties. So there was a couple of us who learned tricks, and we also taught kids that we knew tricks. So they were basic escapology and fire and what have you. So that's when I first started doing little tricks and stuff.
And are you a teacher at this moment? Is that your position in this organisation?
No, I'm a drama worker, I suppose, kind of like a kind of youth worker, but specialising in drama as part of a community project. Okay. The community project did interesting things like performance. We would turn derelict sites into seaside playgrounds, and get loads of sand and turn it into a themed day.
How did you afford to do all these things?
Because they were very good at getting grants. I think Liverpool had just come after the riots that had taken place, the Toxteth riots. So there was quite a lot of regeneration money. They were seeing the arts as part of fulfilling people's lives and potential, and regenerating areas as part of a whole social package. So there was money to do that, and I believe it was the Arts Council and it was the Gulbenkian Foundation that funded that kind of thing. So there was about five full-time workers.
And it sounds great. I mean, something which I think we'd struggle to fund nowadays with the kind of funding regimes we have at the moment.
It really frustrates me, because when we talk about sort of social deprivation and mental stress that people are experiencing, I always think the key is drama. The key is theatre. That's where you've got to really invest. Drama in education means that you can create scenarios with teenagers, with any age group, where you can improvise, where you can take social situations and you put yourself and you act out situations. You act out the the emotion, and you can learn from playing games. And I just so sad that after all of these years, tens and tens of years, that drama in education isn't still valued and given the priority that it's like alternative medicines, that if they were embraced, they can save a lot of money, they can do a lot of good, they can change thinking. It's just about a different approach.
But maybe this is the thing that with education, what's happened is, and social care, I suppose, as well, is it's all seen as a business. And you working through your problems, the profit is so far departed from that it's hard to see value.
It's kind of that big pharma against, herbal medicine and logic.
Yeah, exactly that. And so you're going around with the community group, and you guys are performing at the local fetes.
Right. So I'm doing a little bit of learning, a little bit of three-ball juggling, a little bit of fire eating, a little bit of escapology. It's kind of interesting because if you look at some of the early stuff we're going to get onto that was going on in Covent Garden, it's still, I don't know what goes on now, but it's still kind of hawking back to that kind of vaudeville time. So there's still that kind of special act. There's still that sort of, that Houdini thing is still there. And, so, so I used to just get lots of old magic books. And
did you enjoy juggling when you first started doing it?
No, I never enjoyed juggling. I don't really like juggling now. And I was absolutely useless at it. I'm a terrible juggler, but it kind of like pointed to, I learned that, first of all, obviously you start off trying the best that you can, and you try to think, I'm a fire eater, I'm a juggler, I'm a fire blower, and then slowly you realize when you're performing that you're really sloppy, and that you're really not very stylish, and that you're not very good. And then you realize that somebody laughed at you because you were that way, and then it kind of rings a bell, and then you realize, well, you get more out of dropping fire sticks at a crucial moment than maybe you do trying to impress people that you can juggle 5 flaming torches. And I think that's fundamental to what I did and how my act developed. It was more from just recognizing that there was fun to be had taking the piss out of yourself, and realizing that's what the audiences respected and liked too. The fact that you could take the piss out of yourself and what you're doing, you could laugh at yourself along with them. And that was another key element of how my act developed, is that I became very good at gaining kind of very quickly sort of confidence of people, because it was all about audience participation. And to get good audience participation, you don't want people to feel embarrassed. You want them to enjoy what they're doing, make them into the star. And that's kind of what I realized, that it was about fun and showing that you were having fun and sharing. You're in a shared experience. And if you could make every show look like it was happening live and for the first time ever, then that was even better, because the audiences felt they were part of something that was being created. And then you realize that works quite well. And so you sort of, so it was all empirical, essentially. And I wasn't alone.
Did you recognize when you were first doing it, when you were first testing the stuff out in the fetes, did you recognize and slowly start seeing that there was something you could slot yourself into with this, something you wanted to explore?
Well, only trying to think back all those years, only that I probably recognized that it was fun, and it was more fun, and that it was great to see people laughing, and it was pleasurable. You know, it wasn't like stress. You know, it was like, hey, I'm looking forward to Saturday going up to Covent Garden. Because I didn't used to go there every day. Mostly went up on a Saturday, so I don't know what was going on during.
But I feel like we've jumped slightly. You know,
Yeah.
you've gone from being in Liverpool, and I know that you worked in, and we talked a moment ago about working in Brighton before Covent Garden. So, how do we get from Liverpool to Brighton, and then we can deal later with Brighton to Covent Garden?
Okay, so when I went back to Brighton, which was pretty soon after that 1977.
Why did you leave? So sorry to ask, but why did you leave?
Probably about 1979.
But why?
Oh, why? Oh,
yeah.
Why? That's a really interesting question too. I think a friend of mine that was instrumental in me being there, he left. He went up to Edinburgh, and I just felt maybe I wanted to go too. I can't really remember. I don't know why I left.
So
I think I'd had my time in Liverpool, and I think I wanted some new relationships, and I probably wanted a girlfriend, which I didn't have, and stuff like that. And it was just like time to change.
So I suppose the next question is, why Brighton?
Well, my parents moved to Brighton when I was 7. So that had been my home up until 18 when I went to college. And so 18, 19, 20, 21, go to Liverpool, 23, come back down, got a few tricks, and I performed at a few community events with the skills that I had. You've got to remember, you could get away with a pile of old crap because it was all new stuff. So people were coming to this with fresh eyes. So if you had somebody doing a little bit of fire juggling or lying on a bed of nails and with a tongue in their cheek, a cappella choirs, punk bands, it was all kind of part of that. It was a very misty, grubby little time. What do I mean is like they didn't have cappuccino, and they didn't have sourdough bread, and they didn't have Covent Garden. It was all kind of just bubbling up.
But when you say this was all new, surely the people who you're performing this to, if they're very old, they may have seen working men's clubs in vaudeville, and they've seen live at the the Royal Variety or whatever would have been on television, I imagine. Is this sort of variety, was that not well known to people? Was that something that was a very rare occurrence?
Well, I mean, if you think about somebody like Chris Lynham, Randolph the Remarkable, you're talking about like pretty innovative, pretty creative, pretty interesting, pretty different. So, I mean, Randolph the Remarkable's act was just all about him putting his stomach into a bowl of washing up water and getting suction and being able to stand up the bucket of the bowl. No, there wasn't any sort of real skill involved other than the person, the performance, the relationship, the interaction. That's what was new, not the fact that it was, a little bit of fire eating or a little.
And did it feel like this method of interaction? Because I look at this now in my lifetime, and it feels like it's lasted for hundreds and hundreds of years. This kind of dynamic in a public place of there's a street performer being loud.
Yeah. But you have to reinvent it. You have to take it on. You have to expand it. You have to.
But this is what I'm trying to get at. Is in that late 70s, did it feel like this was new? There was a new reinvention of it. They lulled for a while, and people were finding it out again. Was there a reason why it seemed so exciting?
Oh.
Or was it just because it was when you were young and it was exciting within your lifetime? I don't know.
Yeah, well, there is always that, because even now people are experiencing things. You know, I'm watching comedy on TV and I think quite kind of unimpressed, and seeing audiences being incredibly impressed. And what they're experiencing is being exposed to something for the very first time. And you have to accept that that is, you know, but other people stepping back will say, well, I've seen that. I saw that, you know, you see it in fashion, you see it in performance, you see it, you know, it sort of goes in cycles, but you mustn't dismiss that people are experiencing it for the first time. That's very exciting. So try not to be too cynical. You know, the same with politics. I mean, talk about, you know, sort of the women's movements, and, you know, there must be generations of women who kind of frustrated that some of the things that young people are passionate about now show that there's been very little change in the last 40 or 50 years, maybe, you know.
Yeah, potentially. These are the ones you look.
You know, they're young people, and they've got to find these things for themselves, you know. So I guess it's the same with performance. You're right to say that every generation, you know, enjoyed or had the theatre has the potential to, you know, excite and challenge and broaden. But there was, you know, so fundamentally we were the first ones, even on those little like bomb sites, doing little shows in Brighton during firework displays or whatever. We were just taking the piss, and those you kind of, people kind of like that, I suppose. We weren't taking the piss, but we were challenging what was the format that people would recognise as normal.
You were being counterculture and a rebellious, radical kind of piece of performance at the time in relation to what was around you.
Well, I think there was probably more interesting counterculture performance than what I was doing. You know, I mean, this was, I suppose, the period of happenings and, you know, situationalists and surreal sort of stuff. That was all kind of part and parcel. That probably happened that was sort of more sort of like 60s, but you know, every era has its weirdness.
Yeah,
You know?
Weirdness is good.
I mean, think of Chris Lynam. You know, think of Chris Lynam as just not uncompromising, anarchic, playful, loving. You know, capturing people's with a little twinkle of his eye and getting them to do stuff. That's magical. You know, that's sort of incredible.
And that sense of excitement and jeopardy in his audience.
So then as you hopefully you experience with your contemporaries, there was a camaraderie, an understanding, a supportive admiration. There was all that stuff that happens between musicians, performers, actors. We were all kind of like there at a particular time.
Was there a big scene in Brighton in the early days before 1980? Was there other people you worked with?
Well, actually, yes. I mean, around about the same time, maybe a little bit later, but there were people. I came across a book today, and how to hold this up because it'll all be upside down or backwards or get it the wrong way. This is a book by John Connor.
There you go.
And it was comics at the Assembly Halls in the late 70s, early 80s. And I looked through it and I realized how many, this is Edinburgh Festival, so I can't believe the number of people in it that are from Brighton. That made a really strong positive influence on the early comedy stuff. So as I was doing my pathetic little bits and developing my show, there were clever people like Cliffhanger. They were the main people, I think. Cliffhanger Theatre. We could talk about them a little bit later on. But if you ever talk to Eddie Izzard, he will always talk to you about seeing Cliffhanger in Edinburgh when a little bit after the times that I'm talking about, working out on the street doing the performance, and then later their performance with Pookie Snackenberger. But that's a little bit later.
And did you see them in Brighton when you were learning it?
Cliffhanger, yes. Cliffhanger.
And did they have an effect on you? Was the people around you in that Brighton scene that was starting to form your concept of what street show is? Because performing in a fete for people, they clap. It's not the same as constructing a show, right?
That's right. No, I was, to be honest, I was just a fan. You know, they did a show every Friday night in a pub, which was kind of like a serial, which was a bit like when I was a kid going to the Saturday morning pictures and you have a serial. Well, they would have these spoofy stories, detectives or whatever.
The Adventures of da 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 da.
And then everybody would go back next week and see the next thing. That's obviously the cliffhanger. Robin, who was in that, went on to write Mr. Bean.
Wow.
So, you know, and I could talk to you about the others and all the things that they did. But yeah, basically, in answer to your question, I think it was because I was a fan and I loved what they did.
Did you try and emulate that in your work on the street? What were you trying to do with your own work?
I never tried to emulate anything early on, really. It's like me working now as a photographer, and maybe we'll get a chance to talk about the similarities. But when I first started as a photographer, I just kind of muddled around trying to find my own level and just sort of focused on what I was doing and wasn't looking at a lot of other photographers' work. As I've matured and got more confident, I now feel I can look at other people's work. So basically, I wasn't trying to copy. I think that's what I think I wanted to find my way. Once
it's more than that, though, right? It's that your fear of being infected. You know, it's not because copying is an active thing, whereas you fear even looking at it because it might, you know, poison you.
I don't know if I did, and I don't know if that was naive or whether it was the right thing to do, but that's kind of what I did. Now I see the value in looking at other people's work. But I was as a street performer, I only saw what I saw, which was around me, but I didn't.
What were you developing at that time in Brighton then?
No, it wasn't that. It wasn't like years before I was coming up to Covent Garden.
But you had a show, right? You had something you were working at the time.
I don't think we had a show. I think we had I had a couple of routines. So all that stuff about gathering a crowd and keeping a crowd and getting timing and, you know, getting the structure of performance, that was empirical, and that was at Covent Garden. And some of that was from watching other people, and most of it was from making mistakes, and most of it was from getting a sense of what was working and what wasn't working. Also from confidence, getting more and more confident. I had a very, very good projection. I could really command that space with just my voice. I kind of find it amazing that people need to use, mics and stuff, but that's fine. But nobody did, and it's all about. I was fortunate that I could naturally breathe with from diaphragm, and so
pushing the stomach out,
push the voice through, and I had a really loud voice.
Do you put that down to vocal training, to be going to theatre school?
Purely luck. I think if I couldn't do it, and somebody tried to teach me, I probably wouldn't be able to learn. Yes.
Fair enough. And it sounds like you did major majority of your development as a street artist happened in Covent Garden. So
yeah, definitely.
What
That was the place to learn, wasn't it?
There you go. Well, so I've been told. When I joined there, it was a place which was full. So it was not the place. It was the place you went after you learned. But that's how things changed over time.
That's an interesting point, though. When you turned up on a Saturday, I must have done some times during the week, but when you turned up on a Saturday, probably, I can't remember, 10 o'clock or something like that. It was always like wondering who would be there. It's probably the same now. Later on, you had to sign in and book and all this, but it was more a case of seeing how many people turned up. And you probably won't, I mean, I probably, some days I could do 7 shows.
Wow.
Might seem quite amazing to you, because there were
only lucky if you get one.
3 or 4 of us, and we would just I'd go on, next person go on, you know, and then we just work our way through.
Cupid cycle, rather than doing a draw and coming back, you know, for your 40 minutes of the entire day.
I sometimes got shows from Sandra. Sandra was an American puppet show, kind of surreal, kind of bizarre. I know John McKenna thinks she was fantastic. I'm not so sure, but it was respectful of the fact that she was, you know, a single lone woman out there doing stuff. But she quite often used to sell me her slot. She'd just come and ask, you know, say, well, I'm up next, and I'd give her 15 quid or something.
I suppose it's long enough ago now that you don't fear the repercussions.
Are there any?
Not the done thing. I nowadays, at least, selling shows.
Would that
can be banned.
Still happen, could it?
Yes, I think you could get banned for selling shows. God knows what happens now because the world's changing. But at least in the years before, it was heavily frowned upon.
Would she have got banned from offices coming down and giving her 50 quid not to do a show?
I think what would happen is the performers would get annoyed and they'd go, "Oh, you can't sell your show."
Right.
Ban
well, I don't think anybody knew. But she used to get paid by people from the offices not to perform, because she was you know, they were fed up with hearing her song. Anyway, that's just
it's easy work if you can get it, eh? So why did you decide to go from Brighton to Covent Garden? What was the reason that you decided?
I must have heard that. That's what, you know, probably somebody said, "Hey, you should go to Covent Garden," or something like that. I must have read about it, heard about it.
And what was it like the first time you arrived there then? What was the impression of this place? Because it hadn't become what it is now then, if I'm correct.
I can't completely recall. I think maybe Chris Lynham was there the first time, and he probably showed me the way somehow in terms of bringing. I don't know. I remember I sat next to him and he fired his starting pistol right next to my ear, which I didn't like. What did I think about it? I don't know, but I know that I was always scared about starting the show. You know, that was always the toughest, the most difficult point. Was
why was it the toughest, the most difficult for you?
Well, because sometimes, depending on time you started your show or whatever, it wasn't like people were sitting around waiting to see who's coming on and your audience would be there. It would be a huge empty space, and it's your time, your slot. So it's that kind of like, it's just that bringing people, building it, getting a crowd. Everybody dealt with it differently.
But I thought that during the 80s, families from around London came continuously to Covent Garden to see the street shows. So I thought it was a golden era.
Maybe later, but not in the early days. No. Yeah,
so what was?
It had a reputation for that, but it wasn't like there was 100 people in a circle waiting for the next show. Not as I remember it. It was always about feeling like I used to think like Tim Batt we used to travel up together, Tim Juggler, and Tim could practice his juggling. And I always thought that was good because he could just sort of catch people's eyes and he could do something visual that would draw people in. Whereas with me, it was very much verbal thing. So I didn't have much sort of skill stuff to show.
So I heard that your show in Covent Garden was standing on a pallet of eggs. This is your finale?
Yes. That was quite interesting because I was doing a show with Pookie Snackenberger and Tim Batt in Edinburgh Festival, and one of the routines that I had in my show was a kind of a bingo game. And after the first night, Steve McNicholas, who's a co-creator of Stomp, latterly, I suppose it must have fallen to him to come and tell me that you can't do that bingo anymore. It's rubbish. It's slowing the show. You have to cut it. And I came back with okay, I'll do a routine with some eggs, because I'd seen. I'm really quite chuffed with myself that I was able to bounce back with that, because we've been rehearsing all that stuff for a few weeks. I'd seen a TV documentary where there were a bunch of people working in Hong Kong in a food market, and they were walking and scrambling over trays of eggs. That was like in their warehouse, and literally, I just thought that's interesting. That just sort of like, oh, I could do that, try that, and just as I said I could try that, I did, and then I pulled somebody out of the audience that night, and I said, okay, I'm going to try something that's not been done before. I want you to hold an egg, and I want you to squeeze on the egg end to end as hard as you can. I guarantee that it won't break. And they would do that, and they'd squeeze and it wouldn't break. And then I'd do the same thing, and mine would break. And then I said, okay, and then I did, okay, I'm going to do a few egg challenges of catching the egg and catching the egg. And then I finally, third final challenge was I cracked the egg and I'd eat the egg raw. And then I would go to them, and then they ate the egg raw. So this is all kind of like crap, but it's quite spontaneous and it's quite funny.
And you're at the same time you're putting lots of chat into the crowd and you're engaging and building an atmosphere.
This is an indoor performance, but yeah. And then it was sort of okay. So, and then they ate the egg because you kind of knew that they would, and then you'd say how fantastic they were because nobody had ever done that before, which they hadn't at that time. And then it was okay. So well, where are we going to go with this? We're going to so if an egg can take that much weight, then I reckon that your whole body weight will be able to stand on a tray of eggs. So that's what we're going to do now. So we got the tray of eggs, but what will make it a bit more interesting is if we use your jacket. So we put your jacket underneath the tray and put the tray on top. And now you're going to stand on the eggs, and then it was sort of slow music, build up, off, on, and then they'd stand on the eggs, which was great. And then I would get some spinning plates, and then I would put them 2 in each of their hands. So it was all about them. And then I would take their flies down, stick the final one in their flies. We had the lovely tableau, and then it was boom, you know. And then from that came, we're going to give you you've done all that. We're going to give you a taste of the top. We're going to give you a taste of the big time. And so what we did was, you know, you're the star. It's a bit like one of those sort of Saturday night TV shows that you get now, but that person came forward and they'd done all this, and everybody gave them a round of applause, and then we got them everybody to stand up. There was standing ovation, and then members of Pookies gave them bunches of flowers, and then as the act developed over the run, we would get more and more of the comedy performers at the Edinburgh Festival to come forward at that point into our theatre, and they would all parade down and give gifts to this member of the public who'd just done all this stuff. And then we get people like the Mendizes would come in and they would juggle. So all this stuff was condensed into about a 4-minute period where this member of the audience became the star. And that was an act that I got together because my bingo act was crap, but I persevered and
adversity breeds creation.
Yeah.
And
probably sounds stupid, but it was stupid, but you had to be there.
Well, some of the most interesting and clever routines I've seen done, when you hear about how the people created them, these very intelligent, dense routines sometimes get created by just a chance occurrence. Some little bit of adversity, something dropped into your lap, you used it that day, and then suddenly it becomes so much more after time.
Yeah.
So I take it you took it back to the pitch and then you worked in this show.
Yes. Yeah. And then that became, then I sort of stopped doing things like eating razor blades and escaping from straitjackets and stuff like that.
So was that was what you did originally? You were doing the kind of sideshow classics.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting the number of people that were escapologists and fire eaters. Eddie Izzard was an escapologist, when he started.
I think he did unicycle on top of the he did straightjacket on top of the unicycle was his big finale in the end, wasn't it? If I remember correctly.
I do remember him as a sword fighter. But yeah, kind of out of adversity, just happy accidents, walking through one door, through to another door.
And so was it an easy show to work in? Getting people to stand on these eggs, because obviously you can't.
Well, everybody. Go on. Sorry, you finish your question.
You can't create the spectacular that you did in the stage show. There isn't all the resources for a street show to have that. So was it easy?
One of the successes of our shows in Edinburgh, Tim Batt, Pookie Snackenberger, and myself, 2 years that we put on these shows. One of the successes were that they were very raw and they were very street. And funnily enough, I don't know if you've ever seen a group called Spy Monkey, but I recommend that anybody who gets a chance to go and see them. I went to a Q&A that they did once, the first time I saw them, and I asked them a lot of questions about their show and how they seemed to be like street, and they talked about their references. Theatre,
Well, we interviewed Petra Massey a couple of months ago on here. Yeah, I think in fact last year we interviewed her. Very, very interesting interview. Yeah, great. And it's one of the great things about doing these interviews is seeing how the influence of the street spreads out into a lot of other cultural forms, into the theatre, into the stage, into comedy. It seems like alternative comedy, you'll be able to talk about this a little bit more, I'm sure, really was nourished by street performance. It really was one of the fires underneath its growth.
No, you're right. Yeah, you're right. It does. It was. And don't know. Well, I know that my great friend Mick Perrin from that time, who's now a producer and manager of mostly stand-up, who promotes Eddie Izzard's tours and stuff. He's from Brighton. He used to be the roadie for the Pookies. He's still now a champion of the likes of Le Clique, and brought them with their Australian producers and some others, into London, because I don't know if you ever saw Le Clique at the height, just amazing. But it was all to do with quality street performance in cabaret format, very, very fast, very high quality.
Yeah, high power, high hitting, working the crowds well.
Excellently ringmastered, as well.
Tied it all in together.
So I guess it's still there. I'm not quite sure what the state of play of that is in comedy at the moment, but that would be jumping ahead a long way.
Yeah, well, I think in alternative comedies became stand-up. I think stand-up kind of swallowed everything, pushed everything out of the way from what it seems. But the thing I'm really interested in this moment is I've talked to people who said that you wanted to create a chat show, and then you've gone on now to create this carton of eggs show, which is a completely different finale with a completely different style of delivery. It feels to me like you're developing an ethos to street performance that's slightly different maybe than other people around you. Is that fair?
I think I was wanting to challenge myself and to get away from the back end of the pantomime horse circusy type skills and use more of my personality as the main factor, you know. So I bought this. So now we're talking about 1981, 82 Edinburgh Festival. When we first went to Edinburgh, it was like the same as Covent Garden. Hardly anybody was down on the mound. After a couple of years, it was like one audience, there'd be a ring around one audience and then a ring around the audience next to it. All you had to do was like turn around and you'd be watching the next show. It was kind of like the market was there for the audience, not for the performers, because it was like competitive and very competitive, and I didn't like all that. So Tim and I moved up to the top, up to top of the hill.
The Royal Mile?
Royal Mile, yeah, we're outside the law courts or in that square there.
Parliament Square.
Parliament Square. Nobody was working Parliament Square. Only the smallest theatre in the world were the only people that were up there. So we went up there, and I bought a children's patio set, which was something that could easily fit in a bag. It was two little stools, a little plastic table, and an umbrella that fit in it. So you could kind of, and Tim and I would do a show together. He'd do his bit, I'd do my bit, he'd do his bit, and I'd sit on my little patio chair, and it was kind of like, it began to feel a bit like a chat show, sort of. I like the ambiance of this, and I like the idea of not doing any beds of nails or straight jackets or anything like that. So I tried out a thing where I did a chat show, but it was sort of more like This Is Your Life chat show. And the guest on my chat show would normally be like a 1-year-old baby in a pushchair. And I would sort of like build it up and say, and today, this is your life. And then I'd walk out to the pushchair and I'd bring the pushchair into the center. We had a big crowd, pushchair into the center. And people trusted me by that time. The mums let me have their little baby. And then I'd say, so here you are, you know, and you've had a fantastic time, and you know, and done so many things. And I have a very special guest now, and I'd like you to welcome, yes, I want you to hear her voice. And then the mother would say, call out the name, and the baby would turn around, yes, it's your mother. And then I'd bring the mother on, and, you know, and then we'd have a bit of chat. And so it's kind of like it developed from there. And then when I'd had enough with that, then I would go and get another pushchair, and we would then do two mothers, two pushchairs, and then we would do the world synchronized pushchair dance competition. And so I was kind of playing around with theatrical, silly ideas.
Was there something that was going on that was more below the level with it? Were you trying to experiment with people, how they felt about stuff, how they interact? Do you understand what I'm getting at? Was there more than just the entertainment value in there for you?
No, I don't. I'm not sure. I don't think I was looking for anything more than the entertainment, value that I was trying to develop a new show, I suppose. That was what I was doing, was trying to develop a new show.
Because you might see someone who might be, slight potential maybe, and they ask you this, you go, oh, well, I'm trying to take apart the relationships between each human being in the audience and experiment with this, and there was none of that going on.
No. Never thought like that. Only just thought about what might be funny.
Okay, and so you did this for a season in Edinburgh, yeah? You did the chat show.
Sort of as one of the routines, yeah, for a couple of years.
And are you working multiple shows at this time? Have you got one solid show that you're working?
Yeah, I think it's a bit hard for me to remember how it all fits together, but between Edinburgh festivals and Saturdays at Covent Garden, we were beginning now to get invitations, as you probably do. People watching in Covent Garden, they say, oh, well, can you perform at my this, and would you do this? And even agents maybe getting in touch and booking you in for stuff. So I think I was probably beginning to perform at quite a lot of universities and things, and festivals too. I remember we did the second Glastonbury Festival. I remember doing a show in a lunchtime in a pub in Manchester to about 6 people.
Was that booking? Someone just drove you up there?
It was a booking as part maybe an early comedy festival slot, Manchester, Fringe or something like that. And I remember, just doing pretty much still doing my street stuff, but it worked okay inside as sort of like cabaret slot. And then I remember somebody coming up to me afterwards and saying, well, I'm putting together a TV show, and if you can perform in front of 6 people and make them laugh, and as I've just seen you, then you won't have any problem being on a live TV performance, which I did. I did have problems being on TV. I didn't.
What was that? What was the TV show?
I don't remember. I have done lots of stuff, probably a regional thing.
And have you got an idea of who JJ Waller at this time as a performer was?
Not really, no. No. I mean, it was just what I did, and it was quite good fun, and people liked it, and seemed to get plenty of work, and it was great fun to go to be on bills with other people, particularly traveling around and finding out who you're on the bill with, and being in a bed and breakfast or a hotel and spending time with those people again and catching up with them and having a few drinks, and it's kind of just fun, really. When I was 25, 26, 27, it was probably just met Jasmine, my wife, who still is my wife, and so life was just good fun. But there didn't have any preconceived plan or objective. I didn't. I might have wanted to do some more television, but I think I realised I wasn't comfortable doing it.
And why weren't you comfortable doing television? I know you briefly.
Because the very reason I'd come from the street meant that I took a lot of time to do things. I relished the silences. I relished the movement of strolling around a space and engaging with the audience, and sort of breathing it all in, and the eye contact, and it was just all that charm. And I wasn't very good at sort of like just banging it out, focused. I didn't just feel good at that, and I also didn't feel comfortable in myself on TV. I think this kind of ego and concentration were clouded the experience, whereas out on the street I could forget me and just be that performer
Did you feel like you weren't in the moment when the camera was watching you? You were kind of observing yourself being observed by the camera.
Yeah, yeah. To be honest, yes, and that's why I was so bad at it. I mean, in recent times, and so a long way down the line, and as a photographer, I've been interviewed quite a few times recently, and I'm getting better. I'm getting better because I'm talking about what I know about and what I do. And they're talking about what I'm showing, something that I've created, not me having to be all that as a performance.
Yeah,
It's difficult.
definitely so. I mean,
you know that thing that we probably all experience is there are times when you can be performing, but you have, as a street performer especially, you've got to be very, very aware of what is going on left and right of you, so that you're not surprised or vulnerable. You've got to keep yourself safe, and so you learn to focus and think whilst still delivering. You know, so when something goes wrong or something like that, I just think it's incredible that you can have these two moments of really deep thought all happening at the same time. It's quite interesting. And I've forgotten why I mentioned that.
Well, it's definitely something that street performance really develops and garners, is the ability to be able to think and do something else at the same time. Be able to smile, deliver your lines while noticing a guy walking at the back of the pitch here, thinking the joke will be good when he gets to here, and I can do this here, while at the same time delivering the lines, looking forward, smile. It's a big test in multitasking.
Yes, it is, and sometimes it's about celebrating, and sometimes it's about being self-preserving. Celebrating means, like, I remember up in those days with Tim Batt up on Parliament Square and having a huge crowds and chatting and talking, and then seeing a bus come by quite close and there'd be a bus stop, and just simply saying, oh, I'm going to count 3 and we'll turn around and we'll wave to everybody on the bus, and then everybody on the bus wave back, and then other times, in fact, Eddie Izzard wrote about this kindly in one of his in his autobiography. He'd seen me working, and same thing. I'd see a cloud coming, see the sun, and I would turn it into a stage direction during the performance, and can we have the lights down, please? And at that moment, the lights would go down, and that's just that sort of like charm and magic. That's also
that's also experience and timing and knowledgeableness about what is in the show, to be able to see that happen.
Yes, it is, but it's also about the empirical nature, the adventure, and the discovery, and the improvisation. And it's also about that thing about how easy something like that can be copied. And I do recall a situation up on the Mound where I did certain things which I felt were very unique, and I enjoyed doing. And an act came up from down there and did his show, and then, like, during his show, he was just using every line and everything he'd just seen me do, and I just couldn't believe it. And I think that sort of thing began to make me feel less enamored by the process, because we didn't, you started not knowing people.
And do you
coming along?
And do you think that guy did take your lines, or did he individually think of stuff that was similar?
He sent me an email a couple of years ago from Australia, and introduced himself as a word I never use, who used to nick all your lines.
So it was true then.
Yeah, it was true. And he apologized, and he said he didn't really mean anything by it, didn't understand why it was a problem to me, but he did understand now. Thought it was quite nice of him.
Well, it's very nice.
He had a great act. He had not can't quite remember exactly what he did, but it was something about a box, and he'd get into this box, and it was really good. I was impressed, but he didn't need to, you know, he needed to focus and learn about his talent was himself, not other things that he could pull in. But I guess everybody's nicked some stuff from people.
But what's interesting with that as well is that that's in 83, 84, is that?
I'm going to look at mine. Yeah, 83.
Yeah, well, that's I was born in 84, so you know, to give the span of time for that, I still have these arguments with people on pitch to this day.
You were not responsible then.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, because
you know,
you see, people say, "Oh, but it's standard." You know that thing about getting an audience to clap, and then to attract more people, and they might even say that. You know, I saw those lines. I saw those being discovered. People, you know, they weren't like stock. People, oh, that's great, and that's what that people did. But then it just became stock, and it all became common language of the street.
how did that happen?
How does it happen?
How did that happen? And you know, the best knowledge you have of the complex process that led to the homogenization of material in street performance at that time.
I suppose it's just normal, isn't it? You always imitate and always take on something that offers you an easy route.
Doesn't happen in stand-up though. No, stand-up doesn't happen in stand-up as much though.
Or
right?
do people nick jokes? Probably.
I think some do, but it's nowhere near as pervasive as street performance. Like if I go to a festival and do a selection of good jokes, I'm pretty confident I will hear that joke done around the festival.
Well, you just have to. What you have to do is what you just learn. That ultimately is that you just have to keep moving. You've got to keep creating and working for yourself, and not worried about what other people do. And the better you are, people will know that it was you that did it, said it, and that they will be the ones that are being, you know, called out for imitating.
That's lovely and inspiring.
We know that's not true because, as we said earlier, some people will be seeing that performed for the very first time, so it's completely fresh, and they think, "Wow, what a clever person! What a clever comment."
Yes. He thought of that.
About it, you know.
Well, as I say, you know, what you just said was lovely and inspiring, and it's something we can tell all the young kids who do street shows. But you said at the time it jaded you, so obviously you didn't feel that way about it at the time. You were.
I didn't. I got frustrated with it, but it didn't really bother me too much because, kind of like what I just said, I moved on. So I moved on from that really being a big problem for me.
And how did you move on then? What did you
move? In a way, moving on was collaborations. One aspect of moving on was collaborations, and like working with Pookies in particular, who I don't know if you ever heard much of their music or anything, but they were just good fun street band. Latterly, about a year after the Pookies formed, I think John Hegley and the Partitions kind of did similar kind of thing. High energy street fun band, good lyrics, lots of participation. They were very successful at Covent Garden as well.
Sort of stuff we'd like to see more of now. Music seems to have gone the way of just everyone having a guitar and playing hits.
Right.
Unfortunately,
I haven't seen what goes on the street. I don't go much to comedy clubs either. I don't watch a lot of stand-up comedy.
Well, it seemed to me that Covent Garden was a real melting pot in the 80s. It really seemed to be a place where lots of people from lots of different disciplines were coming together to experiment and earn.
Well, that's probably true. Probably true. There were a few passing by Americans who were always had shit hot acts. They like the British people really didn't have much, you know. Americans street performance in America must have been way ahead, because they come out with incredible patter, which everybody
Is this your Rex Boyds and your Paul Moroccos and people like this?
Yeah, but before then, you know, even when I first started, there was Moonbeam Don. I can't remember his other name. He's big in the circus world now. Lives in Spain. He used to perform with his son. He had a very good show that everybody respected. Then there was Fantastic Mac MacDonald, he was the human jukebox. That was another, you know, a nice simple idea. Simplicity is also always a key.
The human jukebox gets mentioned in nearly every single interview.
Oh, great!
But please explain to everyone what the human jukebox was.
Well, if I can remember it exactly, it was just a kind of cardboard cutout with a record which could flip through for a face to come through, with a kind of number of different songs with a slider. So people from the audience could choose which one that they wanted, and he would open the flap and he would sing, and it was brilliant.
It just sounds very fun, playful.
Yeah, it was just fun, simple, you know. My favourite of his performances was a latter one where he did 100 different things to do with a loaf of Sunblessed, and he would start off with a Sunblessed packet, and first thing he would do, take the bread, and he would knead it until it became a ball of horrible crap dough, and then he would just do all these different things. Very, very imaginative, very clever, very simple, very good fun.
It sounds great. And so did you, I keep flipping because we've got really interesting stuff to talk about, but I'm also conscious of the chronology. Yeah. And so at this time in 83, 84, are you moving slowly away from Covent Garden?
Yeah, probably doing more and more gigs, yeah.
And when you're doing gigs, are you starting to work in the alternative comedy circuit?
Working in Cricklewood and Brixton with Cast New Variety with Roland Muldoon, Claire, performing alongside whoever, I don't know, to look at some of the old brochures, but you know,
Why did you get into that?
Because they asked me to, because I was invited to, and it was a fee, and it was a different challenge, and it was quite exciting. Even now, when I go occasionally get on a little stage to do a bit of a talk on a microphone and hear some laughter, I kind of like it. So yeah.
And have you still at this moment then? You've still not sort of set your life. You've not got a trajectory. It seems like all the way through the story you're just moving through open doors. Is it still this?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was just on a riding along, really. So one day I'd be on a train up to Manchester and be usually on bills where I sort of like supporting groups like Sweet and Mud and Gary Glitter, and you know.
So you weren't in comedy venues. You're going to music.
No, I was on stages in front of 500-600 people, just sort of doing my stuff, but with a microphone. And
is this before to warm up for the band?
Yeah, part of the night, part of the show.
And are the crowds, I imagine, like looking back from my childhood, if I went to go and watch a rock band to rock, and there was someone doing some interesting cabaret or variety, they might have got eaten alive. Yeah. What was the experience like then?
I remember being spat at a lot. Not when I supported the Clash at Brighton Centre, supported by a washboard player. Fair enough. probably should have had a bigger band. I don't know, but did seem a bit unfair. I remember some goal catching me right in the face and hanging off the end of my nose. But I would just say, I didn't deserve that, you know. And then, you know, I mean, you're talking about, I performed in wrestling rings as well, around about the same period. I'd be, you know, another promoter had said, oh, come and do that thing where we smash that slab of concrete over your chest with a sledgehammer line on a bed of nails. We're going to put that on in between, you know, the second and the third fight. All right, 2 nights wrestling, and it was all. I've got the posters still, and I just loved it really, because it's sort of like, I remember the whole crowd all saying, "We want the wrestling, we want the wrestling," and I was just playing the wrestling, and this woman chasing me with an umbrella. Get off! That was good.
It sounds like a lot of fun. And
it
so
was. The second night when I went into the changing room with the wrestlers, they were really pissed off with me because they'd all missed their trains, because it's all done on such. I noticed that they met and they had quite on little chats before they had their fights, you know, and it was all on the times, so they weren't pleased with me. Didn't fit in, you know.
Because professional wrestling is the results are decided before the matches begin, if I'm correct in thinking that. Yeah. And so your life becomes more working gigs, right? You move away from the street, you start working.
Oh, there were more. Yeah, there were parallel to that. And a lot. I'm sure it wasn't just me. It was a big circuit. Was street entertainment was the new panacea, the new, you know, the great thing to have at the opening of your new shopping centre, or if you wanted urban regeneration, you know. And so you get agencies springing up that were booking street acts to go into spaces to animate them. So I think it was John Hole of Crowd Pullers was quite big. We were also doing corporate work, particularly skilled people, but I got to go. So we'd be doing just as easily doing hotels along Park Lane for some American company's Christmas dinner, you know, like going around theme. So they'd have theme funfair or something, and you know, you'd have to stand there with a ribbon and do some twirling as they came in. Yeah, it was good. You got to eat well, got paid well. So there were festivals, there was corporate, there was alternative cabarets, there was the universities, there were street shopping centres, stuff like that.
And what do you think? What are you thinking about your life at this time?
Well, I loved it. It was fine. I mean, I didn't have any plans. I didn't need to. I wasn't. My wife is a very independent person. She did what she did, and I did what I did. She's always supported me. Probably supported me to actually facilitate a lot of what I do. I know that as a fact. You know, and I respect her and thank her for that. What am I? This is very interesting. What am I thinking about my life? I don't know what I was thinking, really.
Well, if you could pick one particular section of that life at the time, and that could have been all of it, would you? Would you have specialised and focused into one thing if the option was there for you?
No, but I do think I would possibly like to have started in photography a little earlier than I did, because I was about 45, I think, you know, 40 something when I started doing photography. Up to that point, I hadn't done anything. So I'd gone from 25 to 45. So 20 to 25 years in the performing business, which is pretty much a working chunk of life. And then now it's 25 years in photography, which means I'm 45.
Yeah. So when we're looking at this, we've got through to 85, something like that. So we've still got 20 years of
we might be in
performance
the 90s.
life to
We might be
go.
in the 90s by now, at least.
If we're hitting the 90s, am I correct in thinking that you were involved in Circus Archoas, the now legendary Circus Archoas?
Yes. You know, like when you look, or maybe when you're a little bit older, you'll look back and you'll think of all your friends and contemporaries in street entertainment and performance, and people that you've interviewed, and it all becomes part of you and a collective experience, which I do. But I also have this special feeling for the time that I spent with the circus. I was invited to go in there by the Zap Club, or some people who'd worked at the Zap Club. Zap Club, quite an important part of Brighton performance. They're also an example of another group of businessy type people who took over stuff, and they would be middle people. So they use street performers. I mean, terribly sometimes. I'd be booked in to go to some street festival in some South London shopping area, which would be a dual carriageway, you know, side of a road. You know, you couldn't hear yourself think. There was no way that anybody would really be at that. It was somebody who worked it out from a map. That we'll have a stage here and a stage there, and, you know. So it wasn't all good. But it was them that invited me to work as front of house manager. I started off as a steward. I did some stewarding for Archoas in Stammer Park in Brighton, where they were, I think they were banned, and then they had to go somewhere else in Brighton. But anyway,
why were they banned? I mean, I suppose the first thing to say is I said they're legendary.
Because their publicity was too good. You know, they would talk about.
Can you explain to people who don't know what circus
they'd say that, oh, you know, it's health and safety gone mad sort of thing. You know, we can't have these degenerates, these chain-sawing, you know, punk degenerates in our town. So it's not safe. There's no crash barriers to stop motorbikes hitting our audiences, and whatever. And they never chainsaws. They never juggled chainsaws ever. They never ever juggled chainsaws. But they had a great publicist, and the, you know, stuff happened. They used to live up to that. So sometimes it was quite difficult. So as a steward, the head steward, I was dealing with the health and safety officers from councils, and probably doing quite a good job, because I got offered the next tour with the next show. Started off in Manchester, and so for 6 months I toured, living in a caravan and being part of a very, very talented, exciting, groundbreaking, you name it. They were just incredible.
Why do you say that there are all of these amazing things
about them?
Yeah.
Well, rather like you might encounter on the street an act that you'd never seen before, that took you into new territory, or even, you know, a film that you just change everybody's perception, or a play, or, you know, any performance that rewrites the rules and introduces new dimensions. That was Archoas. Nobody had ever seen anything like it at all. It was high energy, it was high octane, it was lots of, you know, carbon monoxide engines, lots of roaring chainsaws, things very, very close, no real sort of safety nets, a lot of personal attack. The clowns were like punks, and it was Mad Max rolled into Coco the Clown. So I say it out of genuine respect for the ingenuity and incredible resourcefulness and creativity. But that has its story too, because we're not really talking about circus here, but Piero, whose circus it was, had done his time with the horse-drawn carriages, recreating the sort of Victorian travelling circus and setting up in small towns with the ethos of this and that. And it slowly developed into, people and machines performing together.
Became something of a very new age piece, as opposed to a traditional piece.
I don't think New Age hadn't really, if you're talking about Dog on a Rope, if you know what that is.
Yeah.
I don't think that quite started at that time. So it was before that. It was just after, but before New Age, yeah.
And how did you feel at the time being involved in that? Was it like a kid in a candy store?
I felt so proud to be part of Archoas, to be part of it.
You've got to have some big stories of things almost going wrong or that kind of stuff.
I think my biggest story is my biggest disappointment, in the sense of the show that I was working with was called Metal Clown. It came after Boonax and another one, which were the original punk, extreme energy, danger. And this was Piero's attempt to put circus into storytelling mode. And the concept of it was all really rather exciting. It was a huge cavernous cathedral-like tent with big stainless steel iron doors at either end, really big, like cathedral doors that could be open and closed. And then it was a strip of tarmac running from one end to the other with banked up seating either side. I don't know if it was how long it was, 500 yards. It was a nice distance. And then it was all about the invasion of Brazil by the Portuguese. So that was the story. The story was the Brazilian, the Portuguese were the metal clown punks, these big corrugated iron sheets. They were unruly, and then they beat down the indigenous population, which were the capoeira dancing natives, and then it was mixed in with all these bizarre characters, and it was just confusing, really. It just didn't. I mean, it had its moments of just beauty, but it just, as a complete piece, it never, for me, never quite communicated.
Was that the narrative? The narrative got lost in all these immense visuals.
In fact, Jasmine, my wife, when she came to see it at Wembley, we were pitched up in Wembley car park, in the old Wembley, and she said, all you've got to do is take the program notes, which describe the story of what is happening, blow them up, stick them in the foyer, so that when people arrive, they can, not milling around, they can read it. So they bring, because it was maybe it's like opera. I don't know, but if you don't quite know it, you don't get as much out of it.
Yeah. You need to have the background
reading. I fended off your question, didn't I? Because I said my biggest memory was the disappointment, not the mad, crazy stories.
But I heard a story about it.
I loved having parties every night in the back of trucks. It was all tequila slammers and music and everybody dancing. It was a different caravan, different trailer every night. It was just great, and it was just that. And then it was quite nice being a bit grungy and muddy and leather clad.
So it's very hedonistic, right?
Yeah, it was no more hedonistic than you feeling good about doing your show, or comedians coming together afterwards and all drinking together and enjoying the fact that they'd had a great night and he'd done this and I'd done that. We're all a bit like, you have to have an element of that within you to be that, to strike out from the norm, to perform. Um,
And I
if it's
suppose,
hedonistic, I don't know.
well, there's always a thing with performers as well, I think, is trying to find a way of dealing with that lack of adrenaline that you get after a show. I think people like to have a good time to, to keep off the cliff edge. There's a story about a tent flying off in Ireland into the middle of the sea.
Well, it wasn't the sea, but it did fly off in a hurricane in Tala in Dublin.
So what tent was this? It's not a 5-man tent. I assume it's a little larger than that.
Oh, it was like what I described it as a cathedral-sized tent. Not just a tent with like Zippos have. It was, it had a sort of, design and statement. It was a piece of sculpture within itself. But yeah, it wasn't a performance. It was just during one morning. Just the winds, and we were in a very, very exposed location. I'm looking you in the eyes, but I appreciate that probably I'm not looking at people. I don't know. It's difficult to know where to look, everybody. I'm looking at you. It was a real shame, and it.
Was that the end of our chaos? Was that one of the death days?
They did manage to get a new tent skin built and up again within a week or so, but pretty much the end. Yeah, they went on.
That's the sheer cost of it.
Yeah, and I think not wishing to spoil the bubble or anything, but there were bad decisions being made, and there were some drug issues further up the chain that took people's eye off creative ball. They did do some performances in Brixton, and sort of like in the club scene, trying to sort of reinvent it for kind of like that sort of music scene.
Take it indoors for the dance, for those kids' dance music at that time. And I take it just didn't take.
I don't know what happened, but things run their course, don't they? And then things change. And, maybe with what you were telling me about earlier about the conflicts that you have at the moment with the authorities at Covent Garden, maybe times are going to be shaken up now in the street entertainment field because of the challenges that you've got about performing under regulation. And it's possible that the people that control the space might see this as an opportunity to gain ground and possession of their territory and undermine and infiltrate what you do. So there could be big changes ahead.
Well, it could potentially see it being back to where it was when I began. In the early 2000s, most places in Westminster, the council or police would come and hassle you off the square as soon as you set up.
Wow.
So it might go back to that. Let's see. Who knows?
Yeah. So
we've got half an hour left.
Do we have a commercial break?
No commercial break. We've got it. If you're desperate to go for the loo, you're welcome to. I can keep talking if you'd like. That's no problem. Otherwise,
I'll just be thinking everybody's listening. I won't be able to go.
Oh, everybody's here. So we've got half an hour left. We've got an hour and a half.
I need to just. I just need to post a letter.
You go for it, mate. So I'm really fascinated, and one of the things I've been trying to work in through the interview. And I thought it was gonna be a big point of conversation at the beginning of the interview when JJ talked about working in the community theatre and about it being really positive and really interesting work, is that I have this sense that JJ has more of an interest in human beings than he's letting on describing in the interview so far. He's doing a talk show where he's playing with people, he's playing with characters, he's talking and being charming and building crowds with more or less just talk a lot of the time. And then the thing we're going to cover now a bit more, and we'll talk about a bit more in this last half hour, he goes on to being a photographer. And not just being a photographer, but actually got quite a bit of success recently with going and taking pictures of people in their homes during lockdown. These things are community-based. They bring the ideas of of human beings individually being valuable and important without being celebrated. And there's a lot of character stuff, and I find it really, really interesting. So, JJ, Archoas kind of ties up in 92.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So what do you do for the next, how many years we had to do it? The next 10 years, 15 years?
I think that must have been when I started an evening class at in photography in Brighton.
And why did you do that?
Because I'm going to be completely honest with you, I for working as a solo performer mostly, and going off and doing all those trips, which sometimes were great when you met up with people, but quite often it was like, you know, you'd shoot up to Manchester or Birmingham, do your gig, and then try and get the train back the same so you could get in, you know. It was just, I think I stopped experimenting, basically. I stopped challenging myself. I just sort of like would get out there, go up there. I had so much performance experience that I knew how to make it come across fresh every time, come across and, you know, do my job. And I would feel disappointed in myself that there were times when I knew that I had really engaged an audience and I'd really could have gone further. I should have gone further, should have taken it, but always came back in the end, pulled back and played safe. And I was just getting frustrated with myself, really, probably bored. I did try doing a comedy thing with a couple of other people who invited me to come along and do stuff. I kind of thought they were from a newer wave that had been starting in Covent Garden. You know, they worked with the Vicious Boys and people like that. And I thought they were going to offer me something. Well, you know, we rehearsed and we put something together. We had a couple of dates together at Cast in, you know, a couple of nice big shows where we were the show. Normally it was a bill and we were the show. And that was based, I realized it was traded and made on the respect that Cast had for me. So they gave me they risked a bit on me. And I actually thought that the other people were going to give me more and that we were going to create something fresh. And it wasn't good. It wasn't funny. It wasn't, I don't even know why I didn't pull out of it and cancel it. But I think after the first time we did it, I think after the first half, we just sort of said, fuck it, you've got to go back out there and just do your own thing. So it's not working as a unit. So I think that was a bit of a wake up call. That one, I'd allowed that to happen, and two, it didn't work. And that, in relation to what I've just been saying about doing all that traveling, doing all that gigging and not feeling I'm stretching myself, and then starting an evening class, and within a few weeks the tutor at the evening class said, well, they've just started a degree course in editorial photography. Why don't you consider that? You know, you obviously got a bit of a talent for it. I doubt whether she said that, but so that's what I did. So those, when we were talking earlier about, you know, the saloon doors are kind of walking in and out, and I walked through this other one, and I was offered a place on this degree course with some excellent experienced photographers. And in those days, you could still get a grant. And I got a grant. They just started the student loan, so that was okay. And so it's 3 years working and training, learning, studying, I was crap for the first couple of years. I was way behind everybody else because people have been doing it since they were 16 or been doing foundation courses, or I'd come in as a mature student with life experience, but no photography experience. And
they had this very fresh in the mind, all the techniques and the kind of tricks to work stuff.
Yeah, then you had to present things, you know, how to work on an assignment, how to write an essay, you know.
Stuff that you ain't done for probably 20, 25 years at this
ever,
point.
actually, ever really. I'm not very academic.
And at this point, had you committed to the performance being behind you? Had you said, right, that's behind me, that's a different section of my life, this is my life now?
Well, again, I never really think in such neat thoughts. I never say, "Oh, this is my life now," you know, and I'm not, you know, it just one thing slowly merges and overtakes and transforms. So that's where that's where my pleasure was, where where my interest lay, where my
incredibly hard thing to earn a living doing that, right? And you're married at this point, you've studied, and once you've left from studying,
I'm not sure if we were married or not at that point. We were together for about 35 years before we got married. Now we've been married for 50 years. So we've been together a long time. Right? I mean, Jasmine's been with me right the way through the whole period, pretty much, that we've talked about. When I moved back to Brighton, that's where I met her.
Well, weren't you both concerned about you being able to earn a living?
You're obviously more realistic than I ever was, because I'm a bit irresponsible, I suppose. Jasmine has a full-time job. She's highly skilled in what she does. She's very independent. There were times when I would earn really good money. When I left university, for the first few years, I was working as a producer on advertising shoots for other photographers, organizing all aspects of an advert. Typically, we're jumping ahead, but typically the sort of thing is, it was fax machines in those days. So it's before digital cameras, but I would get a fax from Ogilvy and Maver, some art directors, and it would have six pictures on it, and I'd have to assess how much it would cost to produce that as a photograph for an advert. So how much would the models be? How much would the location be? What about costume, wardrobe, you know, etc. And then I'd cost up all of these, and then if we got the job, I would actualize all of that. So I'd have to go to America, find all these people. It was all street. Everything that I've done has always been street. It's always been the knowledge of how to get people's confidence, how to get people's trust, how to speak and deal respectfully to people, how to get a job done, how to have a wider picture. And that was a joy, that was a dream. I did that for a few years.
So you went straight into quite a decent position from university then? It wasn't years of struggling freelance or anything like that?
No, I do that now. No, that was a useless pile of poo world of advertising, because it's really quite meaningless. It doesn't.
Why did you say that? You earned money. Surely it was useful for you.
Well, it was feeding a sheep. It was also very seductive to earn, you know, £400 or £500 a day, every day for, you know, you know, and it's sort of like you kind of get hooked into. I didn't really like it, actually.
And you say you didn't like it because of its negative impact on the world, because it was something which didn't have something more pleasant and nourishing as a minute.
I was asked to do things like cigarette, you know, go to South Africa and do cigarette and stuff. And no, you know. So
So when you moved out from that, and
I fell out with the people who I was working for mostly in the end, and so it stopped. If I hadn't have fallen out with them, maybe it would have carried on. But the lesson in relation to that was you should never put all of your eggs in one basket, because if you're always working with a particular group of people, then if they're not the flavour of the month, which they won't be forever, then you're out of work, mate.
yeah.
And the other thing is, people like to work with people. I'm the same. People like to work with people that they know, people that they've got a track record with, people that they can see have got a track record, people that are experienced. And so quite often in the arts, we find, and I'm sure it'll be the same, but the people who are your contacts, people that feed you work, they might move on, and they might move into a different area or whatever. And the people that fill their place, they want to fill that space, not with you and the dregs of their life. They want to bring in their mates and the people that they know. And so, it's all sort of like that. Unless you're a very, very high-end product, and then everybody wants a piece.
So when you went freelance as a photographer, were you a high-end product?
No, never have been. Never have been. I'm working on it. I think I mean that in a kind of joking way, but I definitely feel I'm getting better at what I do. I think I'm like with perform. It's almost a circle, really. I'm getting, the more that I do it, the more confidence that I've got, the more I can assess what works, what doesn't work, what feels right for me, what is the right way to deal with people, what is interesting, what might have some value to the society or the context or the cultures that I'm working in. And the more I'm beginning to do that, the more people are seeing the work, and the more people, it's kind of like I'm finding it easier to get people to participate in the work that I do, which is quite exciting.
When you're saying that, you mean as subjects for photography?
Yes. Like this, I mean, more recently in the 2 big lockdown pieces of work that I've done, as soon as I started putting the stuff on social media, the first, and with, again, using a very simple idea, because that video that you made, Ollie Weaver made, that you showed at the beginning, was a very simple idea. What am I going to do during lockdown? I'll photograph people through their windows at home looking out. Do a few, get a feel of what that means, whether it has resonance to other people. And it did. So put it on Facebook and say I'm doing this, and then I've never, my email was just going mad with people saying we'd like to be involved with, because essentially people recognized that here was something very unusual happening, something very important in our lives, and they see that it's the value in me recording that and making a documentation of that, and also not only for other people to see, but for their own family, for their own history. So it was just great.
Was there a thing with your work a theme that runs through before COVID with community?
Well, the first thing I did when I left university, besides these assisting jobs and production jobs, was I started photographing quite a lot of stand-up comics, which was kind of interesting. And I thought that might be a thread that I should pursue, because there was some people already knew me, some people who worked with me. As I mentioned before, Mick Perrin, a comedy producer, had worked with me as a young man together, and he invited me, like, so when Eddie Izzard had a tour, he'd say, well, come and do pictures for Eddie. When Paul Merton and I did loads of names. I'd go out, and so I kind of learned the craft of portraiture, of photography for posters. And Mick was the first person to say to me, yeah, I had to go digital as well. Reg Hunter was another one. So that was all kind of interesting, but I didn't carry on working in that way.
Was there a reason for that?
I've kind of always been interested in developing my own ideas and projects, dreaming up things that I wanted to pursue and explore, see what they look like as pictures and how they might make stories. So I used to shoot quite a lot of stuff for a local magazine, very good local magazine in Brighton. And I also used to shoot stuff for the tourist board. And so I built up quite a portfolio of local imagery, which people liked because it was way beyond picture postcard. It was very, very what people described as sort of Brighton with its pants down. It wasn't social issues, but it was just kind of a Brighton that people celebrate.
There was an earnest sincereness to it.
It was a good sense of humour to it. It was fun, yeah. And so, and then another example of how I like to self-initiate projects, most photographers do, most artists do, they have to. You don't know where it's going to go. You can't say, oh, I'm going to do this and it'll earn me this sort of money. Jazzmen quite often say, why are you doing that? You know, so well, just got to follow it, see where it leads. So I started working over in St Leonard's, which is a lovely little town, an hour away from Brighton, near Hastings. And I've since been working there now for 15 years, backwards and forwards. But I did, after 10 years working there, somebody in St Leonard's said they would produce a book for me. They would pay for a book, which was a fantastic offer. In fact, nobody had ever made an offer like that to me, that they would pay for everything, let me do everything that I wanted to do artistically, get their money back, and then share the profits. And I made a book of all the work that I'd done, parallel to I was making a book about Brighton, of putting together all the pictures. And with those two books, both of which sold incredibly well, I mean, I think the Brighton book, I think they both sold around about 6,000 copies. That's quite a lot.
Wow,
I mean,
it's not bad, eh?
It's not, you know, it's not ridiculous, but it's not bad, you know, just self-initiated publishing project in the bookshops. I went to all the bookshops, said, you know, could you sell this? Yeah, you know. I went to all the high-end gift shops, could I sell that? Yeah, and they did, you know. So 6,000 was a good start, and very encouraging, very motivating. The book in St Leonard's sold fantastically well because even though it's a smaller town, people recognised there was some charm, some qualities of the special factors about the place that were captured in that book too. And it was like a scrapbook for people, and they'd recognise their mates and this. And now, you know, 10 years later, that book is so nostalgic because the town has, property prices have gone crazy. People moving.
The little picture in time.
And it's a little bit of time. Somebody wrote to me the other day, and they said, you know, in our house, your pictures are, you know, always going to have a very important place because they show not only to us what is important, but they show for future generations what our town is like and what people really like and how quirky it is and what is unusual and special.
You captured a character that they perhaps thought isn't always well shown or well noticed.
It's beginning to happen more and more. That more and more is happening because of phones. because people have got the internet now and they form groups. And there's an artist friend of mine has got a group called Brighton Skies on Facebook, and it's got like 15,000 regular users. I mean, and I'm looking at these pictures and I think, wow, people are making fantastic pictures, and so I'm beginning to think I'll move, and that's time for me to move, into same as when we're talking about street stuff, yes, maybe, it's not that it's a conscious thought, it's just an instinctive direction.
And it's sort of like an intuition kind of thing.
Well, you want to be fresh, don't you? I mean, street performers don't want to be, I photographed Ken Dodd. And Ken Dodd, I remember I was photographing Julian Cleary, and I was talking about Ken Dodd to Julian. This was some years ago, and Julian said, "Oh my God, if I ever get like that, just performing at that, just shoot me, I'm sure now, further down the line, when he's probably, has a different respect for somebody was still working at nearly 90. I mean, Ken Dodd was an incredible person to photograph because he was so charitable. First time I photographed him, he had just bought an ice cream. And so I'd set up some lighting. It was over in Worthing, in front of the red velvet curtains. And the first thing that he did was he put ice cream all over his face. And he did that for me because he knew that it would make a better picture for me. And I thought, that's really, top man. And then he said, "Do you want to come up to the dressing room?" And he took me up to the dressing room, not with ice cream on his face. And he showed me all his makeup. He said, "Could do a picture of us together." He was just somebody who had time, for a young bloke. I wasn't young, but photographer in his early years. And then I went to see him for a few minutes because was notorious for performing for 4, 5, 6 hours. Front of the house always overran. People missed their taxis and their buses. And at one stage, after about 20 minutes into his show, he stopped and he said to the audience, "How do you think I'm doing? Is it going down all right? Sir, what'd you give me out of 10? My bloke said, 8. So Ken says 8. That's very good. And you, sir? I'll give you 8 as well. Great. So, what about you, ma'am? What will you give me? And she said, "Well, frankly," she said, "I'm disappointed." Oh my God! It just went so quiet. And said, "You're disappointed?" This is like in the middle of his show. He said, "Why are you disappointed?" He said, "Well, frankly, I thought you'd be taller." And it was just like, okay, might be an old joke. I'd never heard it before. It was just fantastic. And I mentioned it to him afterwards when I took his pictures to him in Eastbourne. And I said, "Wasn't that a strange, embarrassing moment?" He said, "Oh, that." He said, "I do that all the time. She comes to every single show that I do. And so I've given her something to do. It's a little part that she plays. So we always do that." So the whole professional, the fun,
Well, what I quite like about that is that's something you don't always see in shows that you see in street quite a bit. Is you construct a situation where it looks like chaos is unfurling, but really where you're going to go.
Very straight. Very, very straight. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like it is circus, it is clowning, it is spy monkey.
JJ, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, but we're at 1 hour 55 minutes at the moment, so I've got a couple of last little questions. Time does fly, eh? So I ask the same thing to everybody at the end of the interviews, and the first one is, do you have any advice for any young performers?
Always keep experimenting, keep making mistakes, don't play safe as known, gig after gig. Challenge yourself, maybe slip something in at least every 6 gigs. Try something different. Learn from your failures, because you do. Don't worry about getting something wrong or being, fucking something up. because you always bounce back and you'll always learn from it. Is that one thing? Is it? Yeah.
It's one amorphous thing. And the last thing, there's a couple of old people I think you knew back in the day, Captain Keno, Melvin Altwag, John McKenna, people like that. I'm sure many more people.
Know them. I only knew John. I didn't really know Captain Keno. Who was the other name?
And Melvin Altwag.
No. See, they started coming in as the Magnificent Seven, didn't they? With the Vicious
Maybe they did. No, that Magnificent Seven, I think, was with Andre Vincent.
Oh yeah, well I know Andre, and I know and Andy, of course, is still in good touch with.
So the last thing I just want to say for those people you might not have been in touch with, who you've known, you've passed through, worked with your career, or watching, is there anything you'd like to say to them all?
I'd like to thank them for everything that they've done for me. I hope they're happy, and I hope that they're well. I hope that they feel fulfilled and still challenging themselves, and that they're carrying on learning. And like me, maybe it is quite exciting that you recognize that you do have, some stuff under your belt that other people are interested in. And it's quite nice to get it out there. So, thanks for inviting me to be on your show, mate.
Hey, well, my pleasure, mate. It's been an absolute joy listening to you. I'm just sad that we had such short time. Maybe we'll get you back on again sometime.
Your pleasure.
Everybody's been watching, guys. Thank you. Last thing to say, if you have enjoyed it, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. If you're on YouTube, please click the bell if you subscribe so you get to know when the next videos come up. And if you're on Facebook, please join Whining On with public performers. Everybody, thank you for your time. Have a really good